Hello, welcome back to NUA's Caregiver Empowerment Programme. Today we're going to look at proactive strategies to reduce behaviours of concern. My name is Lorna and I'm delighted to be here with you today. I'm a behaviour specialist working with NUA Healthcare and you're very welcome to today's webinar. So in today's webinar, we're going to be looking at proactive strategies to reduce behaviours of concern. The purpose of this webinar is to provide helpful information on proactive strategies that we can use to support the quality of life of individuals that we support and to reduce behaviours of concern. Today, we will look at using skills teaching to promote adaptive and prosocial behaviours as alternatives to behaviours of concern. And then we'll also look at environmental strategies that can be used proactively to reduce the likelihood of behaviours of concern occurring. This webinar is suitable for caregivers, family members who are involved in providing care to an individual with a neurodevelopmental disability, and anybody, I suppose, interested in the area of behaviours of concern. Okay, so looking at the content for today's webinar. First off, we're going to look at proactive versus reactive strategies. So what does this mean? What does this terminology mean? Because again, it's something that we'll discuss throughout the webinar. Communication. So communication, both, I suppose, as something that can make behaviours of concern more likely to occur, and also communication as a skill that we can teach to try and overcome the need to engage in behaviours of concern. Thirdly, we look at engagement and coping. So engagement in everyday life, engagement in activities of daily living, engagement in social and community opportunities, and coping. How does the individual cope with stressful situations? What are their responses to stressful situations, and so on? Fourth, we look at environmental strategies, so things that we can apply in the environment to support somebody to reduce their behaviours of concern and increase the likelihood of them engaging in more appropriate pro-social behaviours. Fifth, we'll look at visual supports and activity schedules as a strategy to support somebody to overcome behaviours of concern and to engage more appropriately throughout their day. Sixth, we'll look at social skills and building communication. And seventh, we'll go through a summary of all of the above. Our first topic then will be proactive versus reactive strategies. Looking at proactive versus reactive strategies, we need to be cognizant that individuals may engage in behaviours of concern which can impact their quality of life and/or the health and safety of themselves and others. So when I'm talking about proactive and reactive strategies, we're really looking at things that can change behaviours of concern and change the need for an individual to engage in a behaviour of concern. Behaviours of concern can result from the many difficulties that people with developmental disorders face when navigating their everyday world. Some of these factors can include sensory problems, so difficulties filtering sensory information around them, with sensory being any of our senses, so sight, touch, smell, and so on. Communication deficits, so difficulties communicating with others, difficulties using different communication methods. Difficulty managing and coping with change, so everyday change that happens throughout life, difficulty coping with this, and problems with self-regulating, so being able to manage your emotions and being able to regulate your emotions. Behaviours of concern can refer to a wide variety of different behaviours, and I suppose most commonly can include individuals harming themselves, harming others, or damaging property around them and/or their environment. It is important to understand when we consider a behaviour concerning, the reasons for it can be things like risk to their physical health, risk to safety, and risk to health and safety of people around them. So behaviour that is concerning is usually something that is risky to the individual or to people around them for some reason. And when we're looking at, I suppose, intervening on behaviours of concern and supporting individuals who engage in behaviours of concern, one of the key things and one of the key strategies that research has shown effective is being proactive. So being proactive is adjusting the environment, adjusting your approach to that individual's needs, abilities, and preferences. And when we can adjust and when we can support in a proactive way, this can reduce the likelihood of behaviours of concern occurring. So, comparing then between proactive and reactive strategies. Proactive strategies are things that we can do to support the individual before the behaviour occurs to reduce the likelihood of issues arising. So, this usually consists of trying to adjust the environment around the person to support them in terms of their skill level, their wants, their needs, and their preferences. So, for example, an individual who is engaging in behaviours of concern because they have an issue with processing sensory information. So, too much noise can lead to them becoming overstimulated, can lead to them engaging in behaviors of concern. One of the things that we might try to do in terms of adjusting their environment is make sure we have a low arousal environment. So, make sure that we don't have an environment where there's too much noise. Or proactively, we might teach them to use ear defenders to block out the noise. So, what we're doing here in terms of being proactive is we're changing something within their environment to help them cope within that environment. So, again, doing something before the behavior occurs to reduce the likelihood that that individual will engage in behaviors of concern over time. One of the really strong, I suppose, things with using proactive strategies is that it results in longer term behavior change because we're trying to teach the development of skills or we're trying to change the person's environment to make it more suitable for them. However, when we're looking at reactive strategies are things that we can do to manage behavior in the moment. So, oftentimes, these are things that we're doing to minimize risk and to support the individual in the midst of a behavioral episode or an episode of behaviors of concern. So what we're trying to do, I suppose, in response to the behavior during and or after the behavior occurs is what we call a reactive strategy. So these are usually designed following behavior assessments on why the behavior is occurring in the first place. And again, with the reactive strategies, these are behavior procedures that are initiated following the behavior of concern occurring. And usually we would use something called a functional behavioral assessment. Sorry, I'll start this again. So, with reactive strategies, these again are behavioral procedures that are initiated following the behavior of concern occurring. So, these are something that we use when the behavior is occurring in that moment or directly after the behavior has occurred. And usually, to identify appropriate reactive strategies, we need to conduct something called a functional assessment, which identifies the consequences or the reasons of why the behavior is occurring in the first place. So these consequences maintain behaviors of concern over time. Our intervention then is to put something in place that is tailored to the consequences identified as maintaining the behavior of concern. So, what we might try to do, for example, for an individual who is engaging in behaviors of concern because they would like more time on their iPad. So, what they have learned previously, I'm told my iPad is finished. I engage in behaviors of concern and then I get 5 extra minutes of iPad time. What we might try to do there is rather than give the individual 5 extra minutes of iPad time because they've engaged in the behavior, is to not give them 5 minutes of extra time because they've engaged in the behavior. So we're changing the consequence for the individual there in a reactive way or following the behavior to try and reduce the likelihood that that behavior will occur over time. Now, again, this in and of itself is unlikely to be effective. What might be more effective is using a proactive strategy, such as teaching the person how to ask for more time to support the use of the change of this behavior over time. So, again, with our reactive strategies, these are designed to manage behavior at the time it occurs. Why is it important to try to change behavior over time rather than just manage it? When we're looking at managing behavior, this is a short term goal which involves containing a person's behavior in a safe and acceptable way. So, what we're trying to do in terms of managing behavior, again, is looking at the risks to safety for the individual, for the people around them, and try to manage this in a way that shortens the duration of the behavior or, again, responds to the behavior in a way that keeps the person safe. When we're looking at changing behavior, then this is a longer term goal. So, this involves reducing the frequency or severity of the behavior or hopefully eliminating it altogether because we have done something to teach a replacement skill. So, to teach the person to initiate what they would like and how to ask for what they would like rather than having to engage in a behavior of concern to get to what they would like. So, changing behavior is trying to find an appropriate way to get that need met for the individual, which over time is much more successful than managing the behavior in terms of a response to the behavior in the moment. One of the key proactive strategies in terms of changing behaviour over time is skills teaching. So, skills teaching can be used to promote adaptive and prosocial behaviours. These can be any behaviour that is an alternative to behaviours of concern. Once we teach this skill, once we teach this individual how to use this skill to get what they would like and to communicate what they would like, then this reduces the likelihood of behaviours occurring in the future because the person has a method and a way to get these needs met. Skills teaching proactively teaches individuals to navigate common conditions that evoke stress for them as well. So, for example, an individual who has difficulty with waiting, what we might try to do is proactively teach that person tolerance to waiting. So, teach that person in a very gradual and stepwise manner to manage with waiting, to implement different types of coping strategies, different types of emotional regulation strategies while they're waiting to offset the need for them to engage in that behavior of concern. So we're teaching the person to tolerate and to manage their emotions in conditions that evoke stress. Again, over time, this is likely to effectively change this behavior because the person is learning skills that replace the need to engage in the behavior of concern. The overall aim of skills teaching is to try and teach the individual to acquire prosocial behaviours that increase their quality of life and decrease the need for them to engage in behaviours of concern. The Big Four refers to four conditions that have been demonstrated to commonly evoke behaviours of concern. So, this means these are four conditions that the individual experiences that make it more likely that if they do not have this skill repertoire, that they may engage in behaviours of concern. So these four repertoires are at the core of proactive intervention. So at-risk individuals, individuals who engage in behaviours of concern or who are likely to engage in behaviours of concern due to lacking skills in any of these areas or experiencing skills deficits in any of these areas. If we can help them to develop these skills, then we can proactively prevent the need to engage in behaviours of concern altogether. So, this big four includes communication. So, communication is one of the key factors that can lead to increased likelihood of behaviours of concern occurring because individuals who experience communication challenges and communication difficulties often struggle to have their needs met. So, often struggle to identify what they would like and identify appropriate methods of gaining access to what they would like. So, if we can teach somebody how to communicate appropriately, then this offsets the need for them to engage in behaviours of concern in the first place. If we can teach people how to appropriately gain attention and gain affection from others, and again, this offsets the likelihood that the individual may learn inappropriate or engage in behaviours of concern to gain access to the same things. So, for example, an individual who's shouting out continuously or pushing things over to get the attention of somebody. If we can teach somebody to recruit that attention effectively, then we offset the need for them to engage in that behaviour of concern. Teaching an individual how to engage, so how to engage by themselves, how to occupy their own time, and how to engage appropriately with others, again, is a really key factor in terms of improving the quality of life for an individual, and again, offsetting the need for that individual to engage in behaviours of concern. And also coping, tolerating, and accommodating adversity. So things that come up in everyday life, things like waiting, things like changes to our schedule, things like things going wrong in our everyday lives. Again, these can be very challenging to cope with. So if we can teach somebody these types of skills proactively, then again, the likelihood of them engaging in behaviours of concern reduces significantly. The first one that we'll look at in that regard is communication. So we'll just delve a little bit further into this. So, what are different ways that people can communicate? We have vocalization, so vocal language, spoken language. We have body language and nonverbal language. The use of pictures or visuals, so the use of PECs, writing and textual information, sign language or LOV. We have the use of technology to enable us to communicate as well. And we have gestures, so things like pointing, leading somebody by the hand, and so on and so forth. Okay, so looking at different ways that people communicate, the first thing we'll look at here is the Picture Exchange Communication System, or PECS as it's more commonly known. PECS is a communication system that promotes an alternative way of supporting individuals to request things in their environment that they may need or they may want. It allows people with little or no vocal language to communicate with others and get their needs met. So if you look at the picture on the right hand side here, we have somebody using a PECS board. So on this board, there are 5 different symbols or 5 different pictures. And what the individual will do is take one of those pictures, hand it to their caregiver, support worker, parent, whoever it may be, their communication partner, in order to indicate that this is something that they would like or something that they would need. People using PECs are taught to approach the other person and give them a picture of that desired item in exchange for the item. So it's the exchange. You give the picture, you get the item that you would like. And PECs can also be used alongside other communication strategies to help develop language and develop communication for non-speaking people. By doing a picture exchange, the person is able to initiate communication and their communication partner can help them to get their needs met. So PECs can be a very, very valuable resource when working with somebody experiencing communication difficulties in terms of little to no vocal language. And PECs training can be found on their website. So the PECs website, as linked below, and as should be available in your LMS system following this webinar. Another way that people can communicate is LOV. So LOV is the manual sign system that's commonly used in Ireland. It's an Irish-based approach to signing for those with intellectual disabilities and communication difficulties. And if you'd like further information, you can visit www.love.org for more information and, again, information on training and so on and so forth. So LOV, again, is a way of using sign language to help individuals to have their needs met. So LOV can be used with any individual. It's, again, just about teaching that skill. So teaching that skill of this sign or this way of moving your hands or moving your body means this. So trying to help that individual to understand that when you make this symbol, you make this sign, then you'll have your needs met because we're able to understand what you would like. Another way of communicating, another alternative way of communicating, is a speech generating device, so also known as augmentative and alternative communication methods. And these are typically portable electronic devices that can produce speech for the user based on the selection of different keys. So this, again, could be a speech generating device that has pictures or symbols similar to a PECS board. For example, a picture of a cookie, and the person presses the picture of the cookie and an automated voice produces the sound of cookie for the individual. Or there are speech generating devices that can be typed. So typing letters, for example. So spelling out letters and pressing the play button or whatever that might be for that to produce the word. So speech generating devices can be on dedicated devices, or they can be apps that are downloaded to an iPad or a tablet. And as I said, they can be text-based, so that you type out the word or type out the sentence that you're looking to make, or symbol-based, where you press a picture and that, again, produces the sound to indicate what it is that you would like or you would need in that moment. Speech and language therapists are very valuable, I suppose, in providing support relating to the use of these devices and on choosing the most appropriate device for the individual themselves. So when trying to decide on what alternative communication system that you may use in supporting an individual with communication difficulties, we have to look at a variety of different factors. So things like visual, fine motor, and attention skills. So fine motor skills particularly come in, I suppose, in terms of your sign language. So is the person going to be able to make the LOV symbols using these fine motor skills? Because again, some of these signs and some of the LOV signs can be very particular. And if the person experiences fine motor difficulties, they may not physically be able to make the signs in order to get their needs met. The same in terms of visual. So their visual motor skills, visual perceptual skills. Is the person able to discriminate between a variety of different pictures? Are they able to scan and choose the correct picture? Do they have that ability? Again, if they don't, then something like PECS may not be appropriate for them. We also have to consider the individual's cognitive level. So if we're looking at something like the speech generating devices, is it more appropriate to use a symbol-based or a letter-based system depending on the person's cognitive abilities? Looking at their mobility, the physical limitations, as I said, in terms of the ability to make signs or the ability to pick up pictures and exchange them, the availability of the system or device. So again, if we're talking about an app, then that's usually readily available to download to a tablet or to an iPad. But if we're looking at a speech generating device that's on a specific type of device, then that might not be as readily available. And what we would recommend is that an assessment is conducted by a speech and language therapist to identify the best approach and the best match between the user, so between the individual, and the communication system that may be most appropriate for them in terms of developing those skills and enabling them to get their needs and their wants met. So let's just reflect on ourselves a little bit. Like, how do we communicate? So, how do we communicate what we like, what we dislike, things like food, drink, people, activities, items? What way do we do that? Again, it's usually pretty fluent. It's through vocal language that we're able to make others aware of the things that we like, and importantly, make people aware of the things that we dislike, things that we don't want in our environment, things that we don't want to eat, things that we don't want to drink, people that we don't want to see. We're able to verbally express that. How are we able to communicate when we are feeling a certain way? So if we're feeling happy, sad, anxious, frustrated, again, we're able to tell people, I'm not feeling my best today. I think I need an extra break. Or, you know what? I'm feeling a little bit anxious. I don't think going out tonight is going to be the best thing for me. I'm going to stay at home and look after myself. So we're able to, again, have those needs met. We're able to communicate with people. This is my feeling, and therefore this is the action that I'm going to take. If we have any needs, for example, if I feel a little bit ill, if I have a temperature, I'm able to explain that to a doctor. I'm able to explain that to somebody in my environment to help them understand that this is something that I currently need help with. When I'm hungry or tired, I'm able to tell people that. And if I would like human contact or some time alone, again, we're able to express that. You know what? I just need 5 minutes to myself. But again, considering other individuals that have communication difficulties, unsafe behaviours can emerge as a means of communication to get these needs met or to communicate these things. I don't want something or I don't want to be here can be communicated through the individual hitting others or the individual hitting themselves. And then, other forms of communication in terms of I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I have a pain. If somebody doesn't have the ability to communicate that, then again, behaviours of concern such as self-injurious behaviour, hitting themselves or hitting others, running away, for example, these can all emerge because that person does not have the ability to tell you or to communicate that this is what they are experiencing. So when we're thinking about reducing behaviours, when we're thinking about changing that behaviour, so okay, let's just say we have an individual who doesn't seem to like going to school, who doesn't seem to like going into the school. Every time you approach the school gate, they start engaging in behaviours of concern, they start trying to run away, or they may hit out at others. What is this person trying to communicate? What is this child trying to communicate? Likewise, if we have an individual trying to transition into the doctor's office, so it's time to go to the doctor's, again, the minute that you arrive at the doctor's surgery, behaviours of concern start increasing. So the person may start vocalizing, or again, they may start hitting out at others, or they may start trying to run away from that environment. What is that person trying to communicate? Ideally, we're able to interpret that this person is trying to communicate that I don't like being here and I don't want to be here. The person, again, does not have the ability to tell us that vocally, or maybe have a communication system in place that's able to indicate to the others around them that this is what they're trying to communicate. So then we're looking at what are they trying to communicate? What can we try to help them do instead of this behavior? So how can I teach this alternative behavior so that it is just as effective as this person engaging in running away or hitting others and so on and so forth? And also, can this alternative behavior be understood by everybody? So in those examples of going to the doctor, surgery, or going to school and trying to hit and run away, what we could try to do instead is teach them to exchange a symbol, for example, to say, I need a break, or a symbol that says, I don't want to be here. And that way, that alternative behavior, if it's on a communication board, if it's on a PEX board in a picture symbol, is very easily understood by everybody. Everybody understands symbols, everybody understands pictures. So again, it's a very effective way of getting that need met in a more appropriate way. So if I'm able to exchange the symbol, then I don't need to engage in the running away and the hitting behaviors because I'm able to communicate that effectively and in a way that gets that need met. So we can support the individual by developing these types of communication skills, expanding on their existing communication skills and making it fun for them, trying to incorporate their interests. Practice, practice, practice. So again, everything in life requires repeated practice, repeated exposure, repeated trying to again get that involved in their day as much as possible, and trying to take stock of everything that they can do as well. What do they do well? How can we promote this and build on this? So we're trying to identify these alternative behaviors or teach these alternative skills. So for example, with our PECs, we're trying to teach this person to communicate using PECs, trying to teach them to, for example, in the picture there, ask for bubbles, so that when the time comes and we're in an environment where they don't feel safe or they feel like they want to escape, we can then promote the use of the I need a break card, for example, because they already have that skill in their repertoire that we have developed with them through incorporating their interests, such as bubbles, through incorporating positive experiences and incorporating plenty of practice across their days. Communicating feelings then is another, I suppose, more difficult area for individuals who experience communication challenges. And we also have, I suppose, can the individual understand and express how they feel? So, do they understand what happiness is? Do they understand what sadness is? Are they able to label these emotions in themselves and others? And we can use things like our visual supports or our PECS pictures to help that person understand what the different emotions are and to discriminate between those different emotions. We can also use things like traffic light systems. So when I'm feeling green, this means I'm happy. This means I'm engaged in my activities and everything is going well. And when I'm feeling that way, I can continue as I go. When I enter the orange stage, this is where I'm beginning to feel maybe a little bit anxious or a little bit frustrated. Here's what I can do. Again, I might be able to take a little bit of a break, might be able to go for a walk, I might be able to talk to somebody that's close to me to let them know that I'm feeling a little bit more anxious. And then when I'm in the red, this is the time when I'm feeling intense emotions. So I'm feeling very anxious, feeling very frustrated, feeling very angry. And here's what I can do as a result. So we're trying to develop communication skills to help this person understand this is what this emotion is, this is how I communicate it. And we're trying to support them to aid their social and emotional development, and support with skills development in other areas. So skills development across a wide range of areas, things like making and maintaining friendships, trying to increase independence, trying to increase the person's ability to advocate for themselves through understanding and being able to label their emotions, through helping them to access attention and support that they might need. So, I'm feeling a bit anxious, I'm feeling a bit angry, therefore I might need to talk to somebody or have a little bit of one-to-one time. And I suppose to support by increasing the quality of the interactions that they're having. So caregivers and support workers and parents and anybody working and supporting that individual, to help them to have high quality interactions where they feel open and able to have conversations or to communicate how they feel. So all of these things wrapped around that can enable the person to communicate their feelings better. And looking at communicating feelings a bit further, then we're also kind of looking at how can the individual gain attention. So again, in our everyday life, if we're looking for comfort, we can ask somebody for a hug. If we're looking for a high five as a little bit of reassurance that you've done the right thing, again, you can just say, "Oh, can I get a high five?" Or if somebody says, "Can I have a high five?" I can say no. I can say no, I wouldn't like that. Um, how can the person advocate for themselves? How can they say, "This is what's best for me"? How can they ask for a toy or ask for their turn in a game? How can they ask to join in a game or join in an activity? So you see other people playing, you want to play too. How can you get involved in that? How can you ask for help? How can you ask for comfort when you're sad? Ask for information from others. So, for example, I might be feeling anxious because I don't know where my mom is. How can I ask where she is? When somebody is again experiencing difficulties in recruiting attention and understanding these elements, these can all lead to behaviors of concern, because that underlying need for the individual, so the underlying need for comfort, the underlying need for help, and all of those different ways that we can gain attention from others, they're not able to effectively communicate that. So that can lead to feelings of frustration, or inadvertently the person can learn, when I engage in behaviors of concern, then I get these things that I'm looking for. So I engage in behaviors of concern, and somebody offers me a hug to try and comfort me. So these skills can increase in complexity and include examples like gaining attention from peers, conversational topics, giving and receiving compliments, telling jokes, so on and so forth. And again, behaviours of concern can arise around all of these areas as well. So, inappropriately gaining attention from peers through engaging in risky behaviours, engaging in inappropriate conversational topics to try and gain further attention and gain maybe a more extreme reaction from somebody. So we're looking at how can the individual gain this attention. Number one, if they're gaining attention in through using behaviors of concern or in inappropriate ways, then how can we teach somebody to gain this attention in a more positive or pro-social way using a more appropriate behavior? So we're looking at ways to try and increase skills across all of these different areas. So being able to ask appropriately for physical touch, for example, being able to ask appropriately to share, to join in an activity, or for help, whatever it may be. Again, behaviour occurs as a means of communication. So when we're trying to teach the individual a communicative response that seeks to gain reassurance, support, affection, and attention from others, then we're teaching them appropriate skills to replace the need to engage in a behaviour of concern. So again, it's important that the communication system is easily understood by others that do not know them very well. So sometimes one of the difficulties in terms of love and sign language is that you require training to be able to understand what love or sign language means for that person. So you require training to be able to interpret that. However, things like using gestures such as pointing or tapping somebody on the shoulder for attention, for example, or picture exchange communication systems can be that little bit more effective because they're easily interpreted by everybody. So it's also important to ensure that our approach is individualized to the person, to their wants, needs, preferences, background, context, so on and so forth. We also need to consider the individual's independence and self-advocacy skills. So we're trying to develop skills across their independence and their ability to look after themselves. So their ability to say no to others, their ability to do things for themselves so that they can increase their self-reliance and reduce the amount of support that they need. So reducing the amount of support somebody needs is also key, I suppose, in terms of their behaviours of concern through promoting that autonomy and promoting that feeling of reliance in and of themselves, being able to control what's happening in their environment, for example. We should also try to provide ample opportunities for individuals engaging in behaviours of concern to access support and attention from others, and I suppose reduce the need for this person to seek attention through unhelpful behaviours or behaviours of concern. So we're trying to catch the person being good. We're trying to catch the person being good in terms of they're appropriately communicating or they're appropriately tolerating something, that we're again drawing attention to that and saying like, oh, that's great, you asked for help really nicely there. Or scheduling one-to-one time with somebody. So if somebody is looking for quite a lot of attention and maybe engaging in behaviours of concern to recruit that attention, proactively what we might try to do is say, okay, about every 30 minutes, a behaviour of concern is happening because my attention is divided. So this may be at home where you have multiple different children, it may be in a school environment or a residential environment, or just in the everyday life in the community. Our attention is quite frequently divided between people. If somebody is engaging in that behavior of concern to try and get our attention back to them, so shouting out of turn, or maybe taking something from a peer or taking something from their sister or their brother, then what we might try to do is say, okay, that person is doing that to try and get my attention. So rather than waiting for a behavior of concern to happen roughly every 30 minutes, what I might try to do is schedule one-to-one time every 20 minutes so that need is met, that need for attention is met in advance of the need for a behavior of concern to happen. The third topic that we're going to look at then is engagement and coping. So again, when we're looking at engagement, we're looking at engagement while somebody is alone and also with others. So again, just taking a little bit of time to reflect on yourself. Reflect on, what do you do in your spare time? What do you do to relax or decompress? What activities do you enjoy doing by yourself? And what activities do you like to do with others? In general, engagement in activities across, I suppose, a variety of different avenues in our lives can lead to a better quality of life, And when somebody is experiencing a better quality of life, in general, that leads to a reduction of behaviours of concern. So behaviours of concern always, again, occur usually due to this unmet need. And when we can improve somebody's quality of life and we can improve their access to their community, we can improve their access to activities that they enjoy, oftentimes this leads to a reduction in their engagement of behaviours of concern. So, thinking about people that we support, then again, whether it be a child, whether it be an adult, whether it be somebody at home or somebody in a residential setting or a community based setting, consider how that individual spends their free time. Do they have meaningful activities that they can engage in, and how do they engage with others? So how can we support that individual at the core of everything to spend their free time in meaningful ways, engaging in things that are meaningful to them? So some individuals as well may have specific interests. So they may, for example, really love gaming. They may really love engaging in arts and crafts activities, whatever it might be. We don't need to change that. We can just use that as a foundation to build and expand on these and incorporate other activities alongside them. So somebody that really enjoys gaming, but typically only games alone, what we might try to do is get a gaming community. Or they enjoy gaming, they enjoy different, I suppose, aspects of the games. They might be interested in something like a little coding course or, again, a coding group of people interested in similar things to what they are interested in. So again, we can try to look at independent play, leisure skills, and so on and so forth, but we try to follow the individual's lead, follow what they are telling us that they're interested in, whether it be again through a spoken word or through their engagement in those activities. So we're trying to identify what is it that's meaningful for you and how can I enhance that in terms of providing you with more access to that activity to engage in, but also using that activity as a foundation to expand into other areas where we may be able to develop interests. One of the things that we can try to do again throughout somebody's day is to provide choice for the person. So, trying to provide somebody with choice to ensure that the choices they have are meaningful for them and incorporate their most preferred interests and activities. So, when we take the person at the center of that and we're identifying this is what this person engages in, this is what's potentially meaningful to them, this is what they seek out, when we can provide them with access to that throughout their day, this reduces the likelihood of behaviours of concern because the person is interested and engaged in what they would like to do. If we're not able to provide them with access to their preferred interests and activities, then this increases the likelihood of engaging in behaviours of concern because, again, they may be engaging in activities that they're not interested in places that they don't want to be. So we try to make less preferred activities more enjoyable and more attainable for people by incorporating and blending them with their interests. So for example, somebody who doesn't enjoy taking a bath, what we might try to do is use preferred items in the bath. So try to make it more enjoyable through giving toys and so on and so forth. Or for somebody who doesn't like engaging in schoolwork, what we might try to do is incorporate elements of TV shows that they're interested in or movies. So we might have, for example, Minions, Maths, or something along those lines to try and engage that person, to try to use something that they're already interested in to promote their engagement in that activity. And we try to support the person's advocacy skills by teaching them to communicate as well if they do not like something. So again, I want a break, or no, do you want to do this? Yes or no? And try to teach the person to choose no. So trying to communicate that they don't like something or they don't want to do something. So leading on from that, let's think about different ways of coping. Think of ourselves, let's reflect on ourselves and think of an activity that you dislike or one that causes you anxiety. And think about your reactions to that. Do you always procrastinate or avoid the activity? Do you try to put it off as long as possible? What are the pros and cons of procrastination or avoidance? What do you do before this activity to help you prepare for it? What do you do while the activity is ongoing to try and support yourself throughout? What do you do afterwards to help you decompress or help you kind of overcome the stress associated with it? And how do you reflect on that experience? So we all encounter things in everyday lives that causes us a little bit of stress or anxiety or things that we dislike in our everyday lives. And I suppose we've developed methods to cope with this. We've developed things that we do to prepare ourselves and also things that we use to help ourselves decompress. But the individuals that we work with don't always have these skills. So, again, one kind of important area in terms of supporting an individual to overcome behaviours of concern is to proactively try to teach appropriate coping and appropriate ways of regulating emotions. Looking at coping and tolerance, then, often people with disabilities, neurodevelopmental disorders, or complex needs might find particular situations or environments overwhelming. So some activities that we engage in everyday life are simply unavoidable and or may be necessary for their health and safety. So things like medical appointments, grocery shopping, etc. It can be difficult to target these skills proactively, but we can consider the benefits of building coping and tolerance skills in general and the benefits of promoting engaging in the activities. So we need to consider what the individual finds challenging and what they need to overcome with this challenge for their health and safety or their quality of life. And how can we support and plan for this in a proactive way? So we can do this by building on, again, on their communication and their advocacy skills. So teaching them safe and effective ways of refusing the activities. So simply saying no, simply, using a symbol to indicate no, using a symbol to indicate that they need a break. We can try and promote a sense of empowerment and control by providing the person with choices and enabling them to make the choices. We can validate their feelings and consider whether this activity is really necessary or whether it can be avoided. So, again, within this individual's everyday life, is it really 100% necessary for us to try and teach them to cope with this? For things that are unavoidable, so things, like doctor's appointments, dentist's appointments, all of our kind of medical appointments, what we can try to do is break the activity into smaller, more manageable steps. Consider these steps and how the individual can overcome these. So, for example, if we're trying to teach somebody to tolerate visiting the doctor's office, what we might start with is breaking that down into really small components, whereby we just simply drive up outside the doctor's office as step one. So we just park outside, spend a couple of minutes there, and we leave. The next step might be driving to the doctor's office, sitting outside, tolerating that, and maybe walking to the front door. The step after that could be going inside the front door. So we're building this up in a gradual way, and we're trying to teach the person to tolerate that kind of stressor in a very graduated way. And again, supporting them to understand what's happening through maybe using things like visual supports. So we can use a visual schedule or a social story to help that person understand that this is what we're doing. So a social story that says, we're going to the doctor, this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen afterwards. We can try to role play an activity with somebody to help them build familiarity and confidence around it. We can use images and videos of the activity. So again, going to the doctor's office, this is what it looks like. This is what going to the hospital looks like. This is what you're going to see. Again, we can try to validate feelings. So I understand you're feeling anxious. I understand that this is not nice. I understand that this is something that's really difficult for you. And trying to reassure the person. So, it's going to be okay. I'm here. Everything's going to be fine. We can try to schedule something positive afterwards and use this to help and motivate the person throughout. So, okay, I understand the doctor's is really difficult, but first we're going to go to the doctor's, and when the doctor's is finished, then we can go get some ice cream afterwards. Or, I understand that the dentist isn't nice, but once the dentist is over, we can go to the park and we can go for a nice big walk. Trying to schedule something that the person enjoys afterwards to help motivate them and support them, understanding, okay, this is difficult, but afterwards I have something to look forward to. So our example here is the doctor's visit. So we can try and create an activity schedule or a social story with visuals of the steps. So our social story might include the time of the appointment. So we're going to the doctor's today. We're going at 3:00. We're going to go in the car to get there. We're going to wait here in this waiting area. Then the doctor is going to come and call us to the office. The doctor then is going to check our breathing and check our heart using a stethoscope. I'm going to be there with you at all times. And then afterwards, we're going to go to the playground. So again, the activity schedule or the social story can help the person understand the steps involved in going to the doctor's office. We could also do this at home, or again, if the person is in residential care in their setting, to help them understand that these are the steps. So we're going to work through this ourselves. I'm going to be the doctor, you're going to be your patient. and here's what we're going to do. And you can use your social story to, again, help them understand that. Or we could use things at home like toys to demonstrate the checkup and rehearse again what the doctor might say. So you can find an example of this in the sample tools section in the learner area of your learning management system if you're interested in looking into this a little bit further. When going to the doctor as well, one of the things that we can try to do, I suppose, in terms of coping is try to bring a preferred item, object, something comforting to the individual to provide that bit of comfort and support. So again, trying to identify stressors and combat these in advance. So being proactive about it. Okay, the waiting area, for example, can be a potential stressor. So what we might try to do is call ahead and arrange for an appointment late in the afternoon when there won't be very many people waiting. Or we can call ahead to the doctors and see, is there a quiet room or a private space where the person can wait rather than waiting in the waiting room? If the person is sensitive to noise, what we could try to do is use things like our ear defenders or noise cancelling headphones to try and support them in tolerating being in the waiting area, which is that little bit noisy. Or we could try to bring something to distract the individual and make the experience a little bit more tolerable for them. So we could bring something like a favourite book or a preferred game on the iPad to help occupy them so that, again, they're not focusing on the negative or the stressor of being there. Okay, the next topic that we're going to look at are environmental strategies. So some considerations for using environmental strategies. We might consider what are some everyday items or activities that can support us throughout the day. So again, reflecting on ourselves. I certainly use things like calendars, alarms, my diary, timers, weekly structures. So for example, working Monday to Friday, it's fairly predictable. These are things that support me throughout my day. They help me to understand where I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to be doing, what's expected of me at any stage. And then what are some everyday items and activities that we can use to support the individual throughout their day? So again, similar enough to ourselves, individuals with behaviours of concern, with communication difficulties, neurodevelopmental disorders, they also require support to understand what's happening throughout their day. So, in terms of our environmental strategies, being person first, so trying to promote choice and encourage self advocacy for the person, trying to respect the individual's preferences. Again, reflecting on ourselves, we have ownership over our days. We make a lot of choices. You choose whether or not to show up to work every day, even though sometimes it might not feel like it. We choose what we want to eat for dinner. Oftentimes, people with behaviours of concern, communication challenges, neurodevelopmental disorders do not have that level of choice in their everyday environments. Choices are often made for them. So we can try, I suppose, as a first environmental strategy is to put the person at the centre of that and enable them to make choices. So not just assuming this is what you want or not just giving that this is what you're getting. Trying to involve the person in making choice around their day and around the things that are happening to them and with them in their environment. Where possible, we're trying to change the environment to better suit the individual. So again, if we have an individual who struggles with sensory input, trying to reduce the level of noise in their environment. So we might use things like soundproofing, or we might use things like low arousal environments to try and better suit that to their individual needs. Trying to make sure that they have choices. So rather than just assuming this is what you're having for your dinner, trying to say, do you want this or this for your dinner? Or do you want to do this first or this first? So again, we're trying to make sure that they have choices and again, that they have access to preferred activities so that their interests are incorporated within this. We're trying to determine, is behavior change necessary for their quality of life and or for their health and safety? So oftentimes working with individuals engaging in behaviors of concern, we can determine, this behavior needs to change, or we need to try and reduce this behavior. But is that really necessary for the person at the center of that? So if somebody, for example, is making a lot of loud noises and people around them are finding that very difficult to cope with, that might be something that, again, could be identified as necessary for behavior change. But is it meaningful for the person? Is it something that's necessary for them? Or is it necessary for the people around them? If it's only necessary for the people around them, then we shouldn't really be looking at changing that behavior. Some necessary activities that we may, again, try to promote or encourage engagement in are things like in doctor's appointments, bathing, brushing teeth, because again, these are all essential parts of everyday living and making sure that that person is safe. But some less important activities can include things like specific hairstyles or engagement with toys or games, or the way that the person engages with toys or games. That should be their personal preference. And these are things, again, that the person should have control over and should be able to choose. In general, in terms of our environment, behavioral guidelines that we would recommend are things like making sure that the environment is predictable. So the person has a structure and they have routine and things are predictable for them. So they understand where they're going to eat their dinner, for example, that's usually at the dinner table. They understand that at the same time every day they'll get up or they'll have a shower in and around at the same time every day. They understand the people that they're going to be working with. Advance warning and preparation for any new activity. So if there's a change to your general daily schedule, that this is given in advance, that the person understands this, and that we help them to prepare. So for example, we're going on a doctor's visit again. This is something that is different to usual everyday activities. We're giving advance warning. So for example, on Wednesday, we're going to go to the doctor. Here's what we're going to do. You need to get a checkup and you need to get some bloods taken. So here's how we're going to prepare for that. We have our social story ready of what blood being taken looks like. We have maybe role play with some doctor's surgery kits, some toy surgery kits, or whatever it might be, to again help the person prepare for that difference in their everyday life and in their everyday kind of structure and routine. We might need to support individuals with transitioning from one activity to the next and what that looks like. So, understanding when something is finishing. So, giving advance warning of something finishing, for example, so that the transition from that activity isn't unexpected and therefore is easier for the individual to cope with. We use consistent use of visual supports, so visual schedules and social stories, which we'll come to a bit later. Effectively communicating with the individual, so making sure that you were telling them and you were, again, making them aware of what's happening throughout their day. Use of reinforcement schedules, token economies, so on and so forth. So really trying to make sure that we're focusing in again on the positive behaviours. So trying to provide that person with positive feedback and positive experiences based on their positive behaviour. And knowing what the person needs is key. So really trying to get to know the person, trying to understand what their needs are, and supporting them with getting those needs met. So one of the proactive strategies that's very simple to use is something called first then language. So we're again trying to set things up in a very predictable manner for the person, being aware of the individual's needs, of what they find difficult. So trying to set it up in terms of, first we're going to do a little bit of homework, then after that we're going to watch some TV. Or first we're going to go to the doctor's surgery, then afterwards we're going to go to the playground. So breaking things down into this very simple first and then component. First we're going to do something that you may not like, but afterwards we're going to get something that we do like. And again, it's something that's reflective of how we all operate on an everyday basis as well. So first of all, we go to work, then in the evening we can watch some TV. First of all, we go to work, then in the evening we can spend time with our friends. So again, using this simple kind of concept of first we do something that may be less preferred, but we get something preferred afterwards. This can detail expectations, it can let the individual know what they need to do. And it also highlights a positive experience that you get once you complete an activity or a task that you may find a little bit difficult. Another proactive strategy then is offering choices. So trying to give an individual a sense of control and independence. So can you give the person a choice between two options? So rather than an open-ended question of what do you want this or do you want this? We can also support in terms of visuals using choice boards. So these are visual representations of symbols of different activities that are available, or things like different activities that are available in the community as well, and meal times, for example, at restaurants, that we're able to use picture representations of our meals to enable the person to make a choice. And again, you can find an example of a choice board in the sample tools section in the learner area of your learning management system. So looking again at the last of our proactive strategies, we can use descriptive and meaningful praise to try and encourage positive behaviours. So we can try to let the person know exactly what it is they're doing well. So for example, that was great cleaning up after dinner. Here we're being very specific that the cleaning up after dinner behaviour is what the person did really well. So rather than well done or great job, which are generic statements and can apply to anything, when we get more specific, that can help the person to identify, oh, this is the thing that I did that was really good. And again, promote the likelihood of that behavior happening more frequently going forward. So it can encourage and motivate the person to do it again. So instead of saying good job, we say we're so proud of you for getting a haircut. You look really handsome. Our fifth topic then are visual supports and activity schedules. So these are something that we've referred to, I suppose, throughout, but we'll just go into a little bit more detail about now. Okay, so looking at visual supports then, many individuals, as we all do, need visual reminders and prompts throughout the day to stay on task and be successful. So again, reflecting back to our own use of calendars, reminders, and so on and so forth, these supports can help us stay on task and be successful. And the same goes for individuals who engage in behaviours of concern or who may have communication difficulties. So they can be used to support the person to prepare for transitions, to help them to make choices, to give them answer options to questions, for example, yes or no. And they're very useful as they can show the person what to do next and show them when something is finished. They can reduce the need for us to constantly verbally redirect or verbally or physically prompt the person. They allow for longer processing time. So visuals are that little bit more permanent. So there's something that's there as a continuous reminder rather than a verbal prompt, which is very brief. And they can also enable the person to increase their generalization and their independence. If we have something on a visual schedule for them, for example, then that reduces the need for somebody to be there to support the person to complete the activity. And a wide range of different items can be used as visual supports. So we have things like tactile symbols or objects of reference. So, for example, we're going swimming and you show somebody a picture of their swimming trunks, or we show them the swimming trunks themselves. We can show somebody, for example, a bowl to indicate that it's time for dinner. We can use photographs or short videos. We can use miniatures of real objects, or we can use things like symbols and pictures. So they must be portable, individualized, durable, easy to find, and consistent in order for them to be as effective as possible. Activity schedules or visual schedules are visual or textual prompts that can promote engagement of independent leisure and self-help skills. So again, on the right-hand side here, we have a picture of this activity schedule with to do in the left-hand column and all done in the right-hand column. So when we're trying to teach an individual to follow this activity schedule, what we can do is to support them to understand that to do is what is left to do in their day. And then once that activity is finished, it moves over into the all done pile. So again, it's kind of like a checklist for ourselves or a to-do list for ourselves. The person initiates, completes, and terminates the activity on their own, ideally, or we can support them in the interim as they're learning the skill. The length of the activity and the length of the schedule can vary depending on the skill level of the person. So we might have an activity schedule just for showering. So the first example in the to-do list on the right-hand side there is a shower. So we might have an activity schedule just for the shower itself with 4 or 5 steps of the showering, or we can have an activity schedule that incorporates a number of different activities as like this one. It really depends on the skill level of the person. And when we use these things systematically and when we use them consistently, people can engage in these activities schedules in a way that's meaningful for them and again promotes their independence and their autonomy. So you can find some more examples of these activity schedules in the LMS system as well. Our sixth topic then is social skills and building communication. Looking at social skills then. Social skills are typically formed through regular interactions with other people. However, individuals, such as autistic individuals or individuals with intellectual disabilities, may have more difficulties with navigating everyday social interactions. And these difficulties with navigating everyday social interactions then can lead to anxiety, frustration, and isolation for the person. It is therefore important to reduce this anxiety, frustration, isolation, and behaviours of concerns that are related to these, that we can teach social skills. And social skills can be taught directly using a variety of different methods. We have methods such as social stories. So again, there's examples of that in your LMS. We have social scripts, so learning a scripted response, a question or a phrase. We can use social skills groups. So these are, again, evidence-based interventions that can support practicing social skills with others and learning these skills in a group. And we can use video modeling. So this is where we use a recording of a skill to show the learner, and they can watch it over and over again if needed. Looking at social stories in a little bit more detail, these are simple, short stories that describe social situations an individual may encounter in everyday life. And they can be tailor-made for an individual and the situation. And they typically outline details about the setting, things that typically happen in that setting, and actions and behaviours that are typically needed or expected of the individual within that setting. So they can be presented in a variety of different ways, depending again on the individual themselves. So they can be text-based, text and pictures, they can be picture-based, or they can be stories read to them by somebody and recorded and played back. So on the right-hand side there, we have an example of getting a COVID-19 vaccine social story, which would have been very useful during that time period. And again, there's plenty of examples of this in the sample tools section of your LMS. Social scripts then typically focus on situations and encounters to help teach specific social skills and behaviours. So, similar to social stories, you can use photos or drawings to accompany the script. And there are four kind of main components in teaching these social scripts. So, we have modelling. So, again, showing the person how to do this behaviour. So, we go through this behaviour, we show them exactly what it looks like. Role playing, then, where we practice this back and forth. Performance feedback, so we give the person direct feedback on how they performed that skill, and transfer of training to other environments. So for example, the social script above, we have, if I sit at my desk and do my maths, then I can dance. So what we would do is model that for the person. So model it by sitting at the desk, doing the maths, and then showing them that directly afterwards they can dance. We then role play it back and forth. So we ask them to perform it. We give them feedback on that performance. So that was a great job. That's exactly how you should have done it. Or maybe try this a little bit differently the next time. And then transfer that from the training environment into the classroom in this example. So you can find some more examples of social scripts in the LMS as well. Okay, so some tips for trying to build communication with individuals experiencing communication difficulties or engaging in behaviours of concern. The first step really is to try to build in time for communication. So this is important because inadvertently, in trying to want to support an individual or trying to help them, it's tempting to help by constantly doing things for them. For example, fetching their shoes. However, if we fetch their shoes every single time, this limits that person's opportunity to communicate that they need their shoes, and it limits the opportunities to teach the person to communicate that they need their shoes. So, oftentimes, taking a step backwards and looking at our own behavior in terms of, are we helping, or can we build in time here to try and support the development of communication, can be really useful in identifying these opportunities, again, to introduce something like a picture exchange or introduce a sign for that person to communicate their needs. And giving feedback as well. So, rewarding any attempts to understand and communicate. So, it's really important when we're trying to improve prosocial behaviours. So, we're trying to strengthen appropriate behaviour, that we give positive feedback for any attempts that that individual may engage in. So we can try and increase the likelihood that that person will communicate again and again. So again, it might be something simple as pointing to something. So that point, we need to praise it. We need to draw attention to it and say, oh, great, you're looking for that. Okay, I'll get that for you straight away. Or, very good pointing if it's an individual that finds it difficult to understand their communication. And lastly, we can look at things like functional communication training. So, functional communication training is based off the idea that, again, all behaviours of concern occur due to this unmet need for the individual. So, the communication element of that is the person trying to get their needs met through engaging in behaviours of concern. So, if we can identify why that person is trying to engage in that behaviour of concern, so somebody is hitting their sibling because they'd like more time on the iPad, somebody is running away because they'd like to escape from the doctor's surgery, for example, then we can say, okay, this is why this behavior is happening. So here is something that we can try to teach that will replace the need for the behavior of concern. So rather than running away from the doctor's surgery, we can teach the person to say no, or teach them to hand over a symbol of no, or teach them to sign no. Rather than the person engaging in hitting their sibling, for example, we can try to teach them to ask for more time, whether again that be verbally through handing over a more time symbol, or again through maybe coming and seeking out an adult for help and asking for help. So there's many different ways, again, that we can teach these replacement behaviors. But again, the core of that is trying to identify the function or the why of the person engaging in that behavior of concern in the first place. So looking at other considerations then and how we can communicate. So ensure that and how we can communicate with individuals that are engaging in behaviours of concern. We can try to ensure that the vocal verbal language we use is easily understood by the individual. So the tone, the speed, the complexity, the sentence structure, that these are easily understood. So oftentimes for individuals with communication difficulties, they may find it difficult to process a lot of language at the same time. So we might try to slow things down and to make our sentences a little bit more simpler. When we're delivering instructions, we can try to gain the individual's attention first, so through verbal and non-verbal means. We can try to meet the individual at eye level and use collaborative language where possible. We can use our body language to support verbal communication through our use of gestures to again make ourselves more easily understood. And we can give the person time to process. So rather than repeating instructions, so for example, can you come over here and sit down? And the person doesn't immediately respond and reissuing that, we can try to give a little bit more time for the person and the individual to process that information and see, if they engage in that behavior after a certain amount of time, or if they initiate what you've asked them to do after a certain amount of time. So trying to again be mindful of not rushing and making sure that the person understands what it is that we're asking them. So lastly, we're just going to look at some frequently asked questions about this webinar and about supporting individuals with behaviours of concern. The first question: I support an individual who does not have autism. Can I still use some of these strategies? Simple answer is yes. So this webinar series and the strategies included within it are not specific to a diagnosis, so you can use these with individuals who engage in behaviours of concern in general. Again, not specific on a diagnosis. Second question: my child has their own way of communicating what they need. Is it necessary to use PECs or LOV if we can understand them? So I think what's worthwhile reflecting on here is that while your child has a way of communicating with you, is this a method of communication that will be effective with other people in their lives? So as they grow older and they go to school and they get more involved in their communities, will other people be able to understand them as well as you as parents would? It's always worthwhile trying to teach something like PECs or LOV as it's understood by a wider variety of people. So this may be something that you consider in terms of developing communication skills with your child. Third question: I support an individual who has very fixated interests. Should I still try to include other activities? This again is dependent on the individual, but it may be worthwhile trying to use that fixated interest to develop activities and develop interest in other activities related to this fixated interest. Again, to continue to expand the person's repertoire and the person's skills. Fourth question: my child becomes very distressed when I try to bathe him. What should I do? You could consider using some of the proactive strategies that we've talked about here, in terms of using something like a social story to help your child understand what the steps of bathing are, or using something like first then language and first then supports, visual supports, to help your child understand first I have a bath, so that's the difficult thing, but then afterwards we can watch a movie or we can read a story or we can do something that the child enjoys. Next question: you reference a meaningful activity. What is meaningful? So again, this is very individualized. It's meaningful to the individual. It's a social, I suppose, or everyday activity that means something to the person. So trying to promote engagement in meaningful activities means occupying the person's time in appropriate ways around things that support them to live an independent life. Next question: what is meant by necessary for health and safety? So something that would be necessary for health and safety would be something that reduces the risk of harm to the individual or others around them. Next question: what are some ways that I can empower someone who does not use words to communicate? Well, we can reflect again on this webinar and look at many of the different strategies that we can use to teach communication skills. Things like PECs, LOV, sign language, gestures, whatever that may be, we can try to empower somebody who does not use words to communicate using these methods. And lastly, my child is happy to spend their time on their own. They shouldn't have to spend time with other children if they prefer not to. This is a very valid point and again is reflective of what's meaningful to that person. If your child is very happy to spend time on their own and has no interest in engaging with other children, then perhaps this is something we should consider leaving well alone and just leaving the child, I suppose, engage in a way that's meaningful to them and something that they enjoy. So again, not forcing somebody to engage in something just because we think that they should. Great, so that brings us to the summary. Today we went through some helpful information about different ways that we can support individuals by adapting the environment to better suit their needs. We also talked through some different types of skills we can teach individuals to better manage adversity. So, compared to before we started, you should now have a greater understanding of the difference between proactive and reactive supports, different ways we can adjust the environment to support individuals, and different types of skills we can teach and the benefits of these as well. So, lastly, here are some references and resources which may be useful in finding more information about information covered in this webinar. So, you can find links to these websites in your learning management system, and here is a reference as well. So I'd like to thank you for your time and attention during today's webinar. We hope you found it helpful.